So this is part of a big bunch of pages. So I'm not reading all of them, and you're welcome.
Thank you.
The first night of the ALCS, the Sox were getting ready to play the Yankees. A new patient was being checked in just as the game was about to start. Dave and Johnson were the only two seated in the cafeteria, both in front of a small television mounted on a wheeled cart. The new patient was an attractive brown-haired girl in her early 20s. She looked pissed off. Her arms folded in front of her chest, her head looking down, chin almost touching her arms. She wore a stocking cap and a large jacket, shifting her weight from one leg to the other while the nurse was showing her around. She didn't speak. She just nodded her head when asked a question. Dave leaned into Johnson. She looks like fun. Excited to be here, you know. Johnson didn't think too much about it. He got up and grabbed a squirt from the vending machine, wishing they had a cup of caffeinated coffee in the place. The nurse led her out of the lounge and showed her to her room. All the men in the group watched as she walked away, except for Johnson. The Sox fell behind quickly in game one, 8-0, and eventually lost 10-7. Johnson thought he was bad luck for any team he was rooting for. The Sox already suffered from the curse of the Bambino. They had sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees in 1920 and had been cursed ever since. Their last World Series title was 1918 when Ruth was pitching for them. After being sold to the Yankees for a musical, Ruth never pitched again, picked up a bat, and became the most prolific hitter in the history of the game. They didn't need the Johnson curse. The game ended late. Dave and Johnson retreated to their room and fell asleep to the sound of fingernails across a chalkboard, commonly known to the rest of the world as rushing water. The next morning, Johnson grabbed a squirt from the vending machine by the nurse's station in the lounge and got in line to grab his morning meds. He had been prescribed Zoloft by the doctor to help with his depression. Zoloft had also been prescribed to men who suffered from premature ejaculation. He didn't suffer from premature ejaculation, but now it took him hours to get off when he felt like taking matters into his own hand, and that to Johnson was depressing. He wasn't fully awake, he just wanted his meds, and then he'd go catch a bit of breakfast. Dave was waiting for him in the cafeteria when he heard a female voice behind him. "I see you drinking squirt." Without turning around, he responded, "Yeah, they didn't have any caffeinated coffee in the damn place. I don't like coffee enough to drink decaf, so I figured I'd grab myself a squirt." And she said, "Squirt's good. It reminds me of a story. I was dating a guy. I had snuck out on a school night and spent the night at his house. In the morning, we were fucking, and he asked if he could come in my ass. I said, sure, why not? He unloaded in my ass, and while I was walking back home, his cum squirted right into my panties while I was crossing the street. It surprised me, you know? This was not a conversation/confession that Johnson was expecting that morning. He turned around to see who was spilling her story to him, and the angry, attractive girl who was admitted the night before was standing there. "It's quite a story," he said. "I don't really know how to respond to that. I mean, I'm not sure if it makes me want to finish my squirt and never drink one again, or if squirt is now my new favorite word and carbonated beverage." "You're Johnson, right?" she asked. "Yeah, how'd you know my name?" "Well, I asked the girl that I'm rooming with who the cool people are here, and she mentioned you first. Said you were easy to talk to." "Well," he said, "it certainly seems like you're pretty comfortable with me already, sharing a story like that." "Yeah, I guess it does seem that way. I'm Kat, by the way. My mom calls me Catherine. I hate that name, and I hate that bitch. She made me come here, and I don't really want to be here. Didn't have a choice, I guess." "Yeah," he said, "me either. I don't know your mom, and I already don't like her." "Good answer," she said. Johnson finally made his way to the front of the line, grabbed his meds, and waited for Kat to grab hers. He didn't ask what she was taking. He didn't really care. As she turned from the nurse's station, he asked her, "You want to sit with me and my roommate for breakfast? He's pretty cool. Don't worry, he won't call you Catherine if you don't want him to." "Yeah," she said, "he better not, or I'll kick both of your asses." She was barely 5 feet tall, but athletic looking. Johnson was convinced she could kick both of their asses if she wanted to, and he wasn't sure that he wouldn't enjoy it. They found Dave sitting at a table by himself. "Dave, this is Kat. She's kind of an angry beaver. Be careful." "Yeah," she said, "I'll chew your fucking tree down." Did you really just call me a beaver, she asked. Well, did you respond? Well, I guess I did. There's your answer then. The three of them became fast friends. They ate every meal together, walked to and from lectures and group sessions together, shared intimate details of the messes they had caused to their families, or in their families' lives that had led them to treatment, but mainly just laughed together. Johnson gave him the best advice his dad had ever given him growing up. If you can't laugh at yourself, make fun of other people. So they did. More than once, they were accused of fraternizing by the counseling staff, but they didn't really pay much attention, and the counselors never really enforced the no fraternization decree. At night, Kat joined them in the cafeteria to watch the playoffs. She and Dave didn't really care what happened to the games, they just enjoyed the company. Johnson thought that if they had met outside of treatment, Dave and Kat would probably end up dating. The Sox lost games 2 and 3 of the series. Johnson wasn't surprised, he just didn't want to see a sweep. The saddest day of every year for Johnson was the end of the baseball season. There was never just one end of the season though, there were 3. The day the Cubs were mathematically eliminated from the playoff race, the day the regular season was over, and the last game of the World Series. As Johnson, Dave, and Kat met in the cafeteria for Game 4, Kat started telling stories. She had won an amateur night at a strip club outside Omaha. She took that money she won from the contest, around $300, and bought the biggest black dildo she could find.
Jesus.
She chose black because she knew that if her mother found it underneath her bed, it would really piss her off. It seemed to Johnson that her whole life revolved around the idea of pissing her mother off, and he certainly could relate to that. The whole reason he had begun experimenting with drugs and alcohol was just to piss his own dad off. So he hoped that she would find a common ground with her mother before it was too late and her mother was gone. I'm gonna freak you guys out, she said, but I have to show you something. She was excited. What do you got? Dave asked. Okay, so I can make myself queef. It's kind of my stupid human trick. Again, she had left Johnson speechless. He knew what a queef was, but he had learned to ignore him. You know, he never wanted to embarrass a woman while in the throes of passion. Bodily functions were natural, but even he could admit that he had to stifle a laugh when they occurred. She kicked her chair out of the way and laid on her back next to the television set as the Yankees took a 2-0 lead in the top of the 3rd inning. Lying on her back, she began to flex her hips off the ground in a highly erotic manner. Johnson had to look away. He couldn't believe he was witnessing this. Butterflies started dancing in his stomach, and the sensation of heat began to grow. He felt dirty and guilty, but strangely turned on. Dave was mesmerized. Eyes focused on Kat's hips. She was giggling, sensing the reaction she was getting from them as she writhed on the ground. Johnson kept checking to see if anyone was approaching from the patient lounge. Thankfully, no one was. Okay, you guys ready, she asked. Dave's face was bright red. It was obvious he was ready for something. Let her rip, she said, and with that, she released a long, joyful report from between her legs. Time stood still. The earth stopped rotating. Johnson imagined birds falling from the sky and priests looking up from their prayers. Dave and Johnson immediately burst into laughter, tears running down their faces. Before he realized what he was saying, Johnson heard himself, "Damn, your pussy even sounds sexy." There was an uncomfortable silence. He looked up and saw Dave and Kat staring at him, Dave's jaw slightly agape and Kat with a slight smile. Shit, that was probably inappropriate. Johnson was embarrassed. "I just queefed in front of you. We're both guilty, I would say." "Very true," he said. As much fun as they were having, there was still a playoff game going on. The Sox had mounted a comeback and took the lead in the bottom of the 5th inning. Just win one game, man. Stretch the game and the series out. Johnson kept talking to the TV. The longer the game, the more time he got to spend with Dave and Kat. When the Sox rally ended in the 5th, they ran outside to have a quick cigarette. It was getting colder. They huddled close near the smoke shack. They didn't like to sit inside the shack. There was always somebody in there, 3 or 4 people all smoking at once, and it would quickly turn unbearable. Johnson realized smoking was a disgusting habit, but the counselors always encouraged the patients to only quit one thing at a time. Smoking cigarettes, I guess, was last on the list. He quickly finished the cigarette. He only ever smoked a little more than half at a time. He put it out and tried to walk back inside, but Kat wouldn't let him leave while they were still smoking. It was as if she didn't want Johnson to be far from her side. He didn't recognize this at first. Dave did. When they finally finished their smokes and headed back to the game, the Yankees had retaken the lead 4-3. As a Cubs fan, Johnson understood rivalries and the hatred that comes with them. Being from the Boston and New England area, he was also familiar with the deep-seated hatred between the Sox and Yankees fans. Seeing the Yankees take the lead and on the verge of clinching a spot in the World Series again made him seethe. Dave and Kat continued their conversations, Johnson only half paying attention. He started to crave the loneliness that he had been so haunted by. He wanted silence around him so he could remember every pitch, every at-bat, every swing and miss, every hit and run, every crucial strategic move. Dave kept asking Kat to queef again, as proof that she truly had special vaginal powers. After each one, Kat would look to Johnson for approval. He tried to be polite and laugh each time she turned one out, but he couldn't help but be a bit annoyed at the constant interruption. He imagined what his counselor Dan would say to him. Baseball is keeping you away from all the little things in life, the good things, the relationships you could build. Stop using baseball to push people away from you.